Cool. Okay, well look, I'll kick us off. Looking forward to running this session. I'm going to hand it over to the guys. I'll quickly introduce myself. We'll let the guys do introductions and then we'll dive straight in. So Dave Wildman, VP of Sales and Partnerships. Lucky for me, Jim's already done the cheesy sales piece right at the beginning, so I can avoid that and not give the overview. I've been with Patchworks around 9 months now, so I'll probably learn a little bit today around the horrors of integrations. But yeah, I'll hand over to you guys, let introduce, and then we'll dive straight in. Carol, do you want to start first?
Okay. Carol Kingsbury, I'm CTO at C&C Group, which I'm sure nobody's ever heard of. We are a drinks manufacturer, so core brands are Tennent's and Bulmers and Magnus Cider, so I'm sure you've drunk a few pints of those. I know Never. I have. And we also run a wholesale and distribution business as well.
I'm Muriel Neighbour. I'm Head of Digital Product Delivery and Transformation, too long a title, at Clark's Shoes. We've just been through the horrors of integration, having done a global transformation both in point of sale and e-commerce.
Wow.
Hi, I'm Nick Owen. I was, until yesterday, the CTO at Oka, now having moved on. I mean, the integration side, yeah, the number of horror stories, right, in tech, and more recently at Oka, a large amount of what I've been doing is replacing bad integrations. So,
okay, lots of stuff for us to dive into there. Then, so who wants to go first and tell their horrors?
I can go first.
Fire away.
So many to pick from, to be honest. So I will go to. It was an electrical kind of computing retailer. We know and love it, all over the high street. We were implementing a full platform across space, range, display, range management, financial planning, and forecasting and replenishment all in one go, because that wasn't enough to do it in bits. Back to Naveed and your kind of thing this morning about it was great to get a nice clean sheet of paper, but we were deep in the trenches of legacy. So we had the joy of trying to create an integration capability out of literally nowhere, using the bag of bits that we had. So it was kind of like bad Lego. So we had some SAP components, which is always a joy, and we were trying to integrate that with a bit of Oracle, a bit of Microsoft, a bit of pretty much anything, you name it, it was there. We ended up with 151 integrations. We had an ODS that was effectively kind of mission control. And I think we all lived through the joys of trying to make integration work with legacy mainframes as well as all sorts of stuff. And just to add insult to injury as well, at exactly the same time, we merged companies, and we also had to change our entire supplier base. So I don't think I've lived through anything quite as catastrophic as that before. But team pulled it out of the bag, and you kind of do make things work, but it's not your ideal scenario to walk into something like that.
Wow. Okay, we will come back to the learnings and things we do differently, but Mariel?
I can't trump that at all. I think that's the worst. From our point of view, the recent transformation was 450 different applications or products that we touched through legacy products that were 20 plus years old, and just opening every single can of worms as we went along the journey, which meant that we had to retouch and replumb everything. We then added in real-time event streaming, which meant that we were adding on an additional complexity. The thing that came out of it wasn't so much problems that we caused, and we went live and we've been live ever since. It was more the capability and the performance testing side of things. And when we finally went live with all cash and carry alongside in the stores, alongside Omni, that was when we suddenly needed some extra workers, and they needed to work blooming hard, blooming quickly, otherwise our sales weren't going to come through, which was a great position to be in, but it was a challenge to be so reactive very quickly at the time. Other horrors, always in the retail space, being able to get products on your site as quickly as you need them, with full descriptions. Again, one of the horrors we had was every time you wanted to put a suite of products live. There are lots of facets and attributes that go with those products. And we had them in lanes on a motorway. So you'd have one was colour, one was size, one was whatever. And all of those lanes went into one lane in terms of surfacing them up into other products and applications. And they couldn't cope with the volumes that were coming through. And so if you didn't get in your queue, you went to the back of the queue, which meant that when the product went live on the site, you didn't have a colour, or you didn't have a price, or you didn't have a description because it went to the back of the queue. So that was probably the biggest horror, and that had to get sorted, obviously, likewise, very, very quickly, so that those motorway lanes could come in sequentially and just keep updating where they needed to be updated.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, so I guess it's to keep it more recent. Again, nothing probably as big a scale as that, but a much smaller business, Oka. But the challenges for us more recently have been just over complexity, right? So when integrations have been built, they haven't really focused on the fact of, well, we need to sell a product. They focused on things like trying to force a single customer view, so not allowing customers to have duplicate records or accounts anywhere in any system in the entire business. And by doing all those checks, they then, if the account really exists somewhere, it prevented the order from flowing into order management, therefore out the door. So because of our determination that we must have a single customer view, a customer wouldn't get their order. And you kind of look at it and go, are you serious? This is why things aren't going out the door? Why? You know, we've got tons of orders backing up in a Magento platform. Magento has been mentioned a few times. Come back to also product integration in a second. But yeah, very much is, you know, why are all our orders stuck? Well, because there's a single customer view rule that we've got set up. No, gang, that's not how it should be working. So that's a really good example. Other examples, we've made it so complicated that actually, for those of you who are aware of Del Boomi, or used to be Del Boomi, now Boomi, and we're actually making it so complicated, we did so many conditions in a single flow, we couldn't add any more conditions. It's an enterprise integration platform, so how we possibly did that, I genuinely have no idea. We didn't bother to try and unpick it, we just ditched it. All the way down to things like WMS, right? WMS should be a relatively easy integration, but you get it wrong and your stock is wrong. And if your stock is wrong, your customers get pissed off, coming to, you know, back to customer service a minute ago. So for us and for Oka particularly, it was just integrations genuinely were broken. And as we've described, if an integration is broken, the direct impact is obviously on your customer. It's going to impact your internal teams, but the impact is on your customer and then fundamentally on your revenue.
Yeah, okay. I love that Boomi's already come up. We should have had a chat before, shouldn't we?
Should have had a chat.
You've left now, you've left too late. Mary, on when things go wrong, do you already have plans for when something goes wrong, or is it just panic stations and everyone dives in? How do you kind of business proof to make sure when something does go wrong that you can quickly correct it?
Hopefully you've built what you've built and you've tested it thoroughly so that it doesn't happen in production. But there's always occasions when something happens in production and then it's just all hands to the pump. You need the right people in the right place to diagnose, most definitely, to find out where the problem is, and then you need the right people in the right place to fix it, and fix it quickly. Because, to your point, it's the customer that's affected at the end of the day, which ultimately has that knock-on into sales and revenue. Yeah. And it doesn't matter which area of the business it is. So.
And changing over to Carol, whose responsibility is it to ensure that these are all working correctly, there are the backup plans? Who does that sit with? Is it everybody, or does it fall to one person?
I think in reality it usually falls to one person.
Yep.
So it's usually the person responsible from a technology perspective. I think Mariel's point there about, it is all hands to the pump and it's kind of fixing the issue. I think intrinsically it tends to be, let's find the person that we can kind of have a shouting match with first, and then we might get around to fixing it. But it's a team sport, so integration is intrinsically dependent upon data, good quality data. We all know this to be true. In reality, it's not quite like that. So I think it's that kind of team sport in terms of the business has a responsibility to own their data because IT doesn't own it. Yeah. And therefore they need to make sure that it's good quality, it's kept up to date, they've ticked the boxes, they've run the processes, so that when things do go wrong and content gets served up to websites and it slides off it the minute it's hit it, the root causing of that quite often can just be that a flag wasn't set or a part of the process had been missed by somebody. And when you're bedding in new processes, that happens quite frequently.
Yeah.
So the fix is one part of it. Then there's the education piece off the back of that to make sure that those processes run slickly and that we're kind of trying to fill in some of the blanks where people have kind of forgotten what it is they were meant to be doing because it's all new and it's all happening at the same time. So team sport definitely, but usually ends up being a technology problem.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to mention that inevitably when one integration doesn't work, it's often related to another integration 3 systems away. So you start here and you go, well, what's gone on? So, finance might raise something in reporting. Why doesn't something match? Or it never matches, but why doesn't it match? Why isn't it within the tolerance? And you find out it's something randomly a million miles away that suddenly, someone hasn't completed a process in a remote system. So it is so much a team sport, right? And someone raises a problem and suddenly from one it turns into 20 people involved.
And how easy is it to identify that kind of point of issue?
Well, sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes you just go, I definitely know what's happened there. Other times you'll be there for days and you still won't find it, and it'll be some little thing which was done. You've lifted a rug and you found 16 things that are existing that were a problem, and that one of those was the bit that surfaced the problem in the first place. And you end up having to fix tons of things off the back of it. So
to try and find
it. Like I say, the easy ones, you kind of go, I've got a sniff for that. I kind of follow your nose. But some of them take weeks.
This is kind of the shameless plug blip, but this is where an iPass does come in, but I'm not going to go into it. But Carol, you're just going to jump in
just
there.
the kind of the root causing piece. So having been on the end of a 4-day incident, which felt like a billion years, and it wasn't anything to do with the integration per se. There was a data center move and someone hadn't updated an IP address because it was in the 84th tab of a spreadsheet. 4 days of literally just banging your head and doing that, kind of routing it back up the line and coming back down again and going, no, just can't find it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And then in terms of in the kind of the new tech world, and there's new tools popping up all the time, and Naveed spoke to earlier, kind of potentially being oversold in integration and the challenges with headless when you're buying like a platform. Is it getting easier? Or how are you guys approaching that when you're buying new tech, that it is going to integrate how you need it to?
From a personal point of view, I think we've become wiser.
Okay.
So we do the investigations up front more thoroughly, because whenever anybody says, "Oh, you just plug and play," that's not true.
They're lying every time.
Every time. So you need to do your due diligence. I also think there's a piece to play in terms of when you are doing your design from an architectural point of view, that you, again, thoroughly go through your design and make sure that it's accurate. And in some respects, give yourself break points as well, so that when you do get a complex breakage, you can section it up.
It's isolated.
And make it easier for yourselves to actually find that root cause. But that takes time. And when people are in a hurry, obviously, to get things live, you don't necessarily have the benefit of the time. But from a personal point of view, do your due diligence up front.
And what's the long-term strategy, I think? And from a tech stack point of view, what is your long-term strategy? What is your intention for integrations? Do you want to manage it yourself? Do you want to give it to a third party? Do you want it fully managed? What's your long-term goal? You've got to have that in mind, front and center, every time you pick a piece of software, for sure. And things will change, right? You'll make a decision, and then someone else in the business will make another decision, and a year later you might be looking to change things. But definitely, I don't think there's any one answer. I think I've had discussions with many vendors about integrations and so on when I've thought, this is the right situation here, but then the next business I worked for, actually it's completely the wrong decision.
Different.
We've got to do something else. So team size, huge impact on it, what your teams do, how your teams do it, what your competencies are in your business, for sure. So definitely, it's really complicated. I agree with all the things that have been said.
Okay. And Carol, any other words of advice?
I think it's kind of back to that from an integration perspective. It's what capabilities are you trying to build? Because there's a lot out there. Some more plug and play than others. But ultimately, it's kind of, are you bringing that in-house? Are you going to own it? Do you want to own it? If the answer to any of that is no, then yeah, it's kind of like you need to then pick your partners really wisely in terms of how and who is going to then be operating that on your behalf. That kind of plug and play and composability is great, but it can actually expand your kind of risk factors because you're kind of spread betting a little bit with multiple vendors.
Yeah.
And then if you chuck integration into the mix, it just kind of adds to that risk profile.
Okay. And Carol, you recently joined CNC, right? How
Yep.
are you? Like, how are you now looking at? What do your integrations look like? How are you looking at going to? What tools are you looking to build them with, or are they there already?
It's I think the technical term is it's a bugger's muddle. So we have got a proliferation of point-to-point interfaces, so my cup's running over. We've got archaic ERP systems that we still do weekly maintenance. I haven't seen that since the late 90s. We have integration tech, but integration tech talks to integration, which talks to integration, which talks to an ERP, because I think historically back to capabilities, it's been too difficult to unpick it and start again. So we've just done a cut and shut and crossed fingers and hoped everything's fine. So now coming back to it, almost blank sheet of paper, but having to put some bits on the map already, I think the easiest way out of the bugger's muddle is to move to effectively building the integration layer first, and then trying to expose the services, probably a facade, which then will de-risk the myriad of different kind of system swap outs that we're going to need to do over the next kind of 2, 3, 4 years. Because if not, every time we try and break a bit of it, it's going to go completely tits up. And walking into a business that has had that and it has gone tits up and it's impacted the bottom line by 25 million quid, I'd like to keep my job a bit longer, so I think I need to be a bit smarter.
And how are you approaching then buying that middleware? That's, because it sounds like this is going to be you've got to look 2-3 years into the future, make sure it's a fit, ensuring that you're not being oversold, all this kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's tricky because I think it's, at the moment, there's a couple of candidates, definitely.
Don't share them all here, will you?
Can't possibly say. But there are a couple of candidates, and I think it's going to come down to which one is going to give us not just the integration capability, but the kind of the data element of it. So to be able to manage some of that master data capability, and to really give us some robust capability to move systems from A to B.
Yeah.
So I think it's a difficult one. I don't think there is a right fit, but we're just going to have to find the one that's the best fit that we can for what we want to do. And I would like to try and build that capability in-house as well, because I think it's important to kind of keep your crown jewels, which for me is integration and data, in-house.
Nice. Well, I guess my sales guys are probably taking a lot of notes there. On that piece around doing it in-house and having an agency or an SI, like how have you guys approached it in the past? Have you built the teams in-house, or have you looked to outsource that?
So from my side, a combination. So every business has been different in what we've done. So some of it has been outsourced, some of it. So more recently, we've just completely changed from having an integration platform out to a third party who manages everything. Again, largely because of team size, but also some of its complexity. So yeah, I don't think there's never a right. There's always a right answer, but it's never a single answer across everything. Again, new business I'm walking into, not retail, but they have so many different integrations done by so many different business departments that eventually we will have to consolidate, but that will be an internal team for sure. Yeah. So yeah, there's never a single answer ever.
Clark's?
Yes, so alerting and monitoring plays its part, and we have, so that it follows the sun as a global business, you've got to be up 24/7.
Yeah.
So alerting and monitoring is there 24/7, which will highlight something to a body if something breaks, so that it can be looked at straight away. So I think that's one role that has to be in place. And a bit like yourself, we've had internal, external teams that look after. And at the end of the day, it comes down to which is the most cost-effective way of being able to operate your business. And some people's operating models are outsourced and some people's operating models are insourced. But you do definitely need specific, trained, competent, confident resources that can act when something goes wrong.
Yeah. Is budget what you talk around, like ensuring that, you know, it's stable, it's secure, and then there's obviously you've got your CFO talking about budget to ensure that, you know, we're keeping costs down. How do you balance that, right? Because, you know, normally paying more means you're getting a better service, but yeah, I guess how do you balance that internally with the CFO to, you know, it's going to cost more because it's going to be a better product at the end of the day?
Again, lots of cost modellings in terms of how you're going to operate and what the impact is if something fails for a period of time, how easy it is to fix, how complicated. When you're talking about a lot of legacy systems that still exist and the fact that you've got to bolt those on as well and the difficulty in finding root causes as well. If you're going to lose trade, in Carol's example of 4 days potentially, that's a lot of money to lose. And so therefore you might find it easier to justify. Get your procurement team in place, get a good procurement person that can go and negotiate a really good deal wherever it happens to be, whether it be in human headcount or third party, and make sure it joins and be very clear on exactly who owns what and what responsibility they have, so that nobody has a get out of jail free card, because otherwise you will be left, what was it? Up shit creek without a paddle.
That's the badger, yeah.
Carol, thoughts on that?
I think all of that, and the other thing I would also say is it's back to that kind of service design piece. So we're really good at kind of going out, doing our due diligence, procuring software, doing the design, and then we kind of go, oh, bugger, yeah, that support thing. And I think kind of for me, particularly in the current role, is kind of bringing that forward. So getting service design done at the start. So if we are going to build integration as the core backbone and then we add everything else on top of it, then we do need to think about how are we going to manage it, which bits are we managing, how is that whole service piece going to work at the start, because actually that might be the thing that kind of triggers us to go one way or the other in terms of in-house and how much is in-house. Your question though about CFO and balance, don't think that's ever existed anywhere. But I think it's about the risk profile. So as Muriel said, it's, you know, when integration breaks, it's really obvious. Then the alarm bells ring, then the panic sets in. So it's recognizing the risk inherent with integration, but it's also recognizing that you're trying to solve a problem as well. So that risk, you know, presenting that to the CFO in terms of lost days, lost orders, you know, customer backlash, that kind of stuff. That's really the focal point to kind of attempt to get a balance, but cost is always kind of key.
Of course.
I think the other point as well, from a tech point of view, there is always an ROI. Whether that ROI is in potentially lost revenue or gain in revenue, there's always an ROI. You've got to put that forward. When you're being pressured and when pressure is being put on from a cost point of view, I get it, right? All businesses go through tough times, but you've got to make that case. And if you don't make the case, that's when things start to get really sticky. Because then they're going to come back to say, well, what happened? You didn't make it clear to us. So there's definitely a piece of that with CFOs to make them really understand what the engine does, what those bits and pieces do that they don't see day to day.
Yeah, of course. And in the SaaS world that Naveed was speaking to earlier, in like the move from legacy tech to more SaaS, is this getting easier? Is the integration space getting any easier, or is it still as complex as it ever was? It's just the sales guys are getting good at making it sound easy.
I think it's always going to be hard. I don't think it's ever going to be plug and play. I don't think it's ever going to get that simple, because businesses aren't that simple, and how we deal with our data isn't that simple.
I feel like it's got a little bit easier though. I do. I feel like, you know, plug the Patchworks piece, but that low-code, no-code piece that hasn't really existed that well until relatively recently, I think has made life easier. It definitely has. You know, rather than having to, you know, have really complicated SQL databases doing ETL processes and this, that, and the other, where, you know, you've got two really techie script-based people who are doing all this, all the work. Actually, it does make it easier. Businesses have become more complicated, which I think inevitably then makes it even more difficult. So the SaaS low-code, no-code stuff has to keep up with that, because inevitably businesses are driving the change and the need for more complicated integrations for many reasons. omni-channel, perfect example. Trying to get omni-channel working without a competent integration platform is impossible.
I love the word omni-channel. Gets
I
thrown
hate it.
around so often.
It's been around for donkey's years.
I
now,
hate
hasn't
the
it?
term
Unified
omnichannel.
commerce is the new
Unified
version, isn't
commerce.
it? Yeah.
It used to buy unified communication, unified comms as well. That was always a classic one that tech used to get. Oh, we do unified comms. Teams then, really.
Yeah.
Teams. Yeah. Fine.
Well, look, we're coming towards the end, and we do want to make sure we open it up for questions. I guess I'll quickly just come around to each of you. Like, biggest advice when approaching these integration projects. Like, if for the guys, if they're about to go through it, what's the one word of it? Well, not one word, but your best advice.
Keep it simple.
Okay.
Done. Simplify it as much as you possibly can. There is no point overcomplicating integration. It will come back and bite you in the ass, and it will hurt.
Words directly from my mouth. Keep it simple and apply your due diligence up front. 100%.
Yeah. Again, keep
That's
it simple, work it end to end, make sure you understand it.
Okay.
But yeah, don't overcomplicate it. Someone else can do that, but don't. Yeah.
I was sort of hoping that question was going to take a little bit longer. So let's ensure we've got some questions in the crowd. I guess the key takeaway is keep it simple. But yeah, any questions that people want to bring up? I can see Jim's trying to hold his hand down. No?
I didn't think of a question like that.
Okay. We've got one in the back.
Carol, you were talking about the bad Lego at the start, and there's like 151 different integrations. How on earth did you make that work?
Good question. Persistence. No is not an option. There's always a way. There's always a way through it or around it. And also good architects. So architects will always find a way. And yeah, architects, more architects.
Were the 150 tools needed, or is that kind of something that had been inherited?
Yes.
It was.
No, they were. It was a bit nuts, and it was all born out of that legacy kind of rat's nest. So it was having to take data from various different sources, and the timings around that, and some of the complexity around some of the systems we were trying to plug into each other. So yeah, not advisable, not standard. Never doing that again.
But it happens all over the place. We did 189.
Exactly.
Not that I'm trumping you.
Trumped. I think I'm trumped. But yeah, it's never simple. But architects definitely. BAs, architects. I'll just say that again.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, go on.
Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about integrations and platforms that do offer the capacity to integrate. Now, I guess particularly for you, Carol, with the sort of, traditional background of the business that you run, presumably you come across systems which don't have any capacity for integration at all, or even ones that the business likes to sleepwalk into now. How do you deal with those sort of scenarios where someone wants to wrap their arms around a solution that basically doesn't want to talk to anything?
Yeah, so that's where we get the delight of point-to-point interfaces. So having worked with mainframes before, I've now got two to play with, which is double joy. And as I said, everything is point-to-point interfaces, so everything is very fragile at the moment. So introducing integration properly is going to be a bit of an education for everybody. It really is. We use a lot of EDI at the moment as well, and as I said, EDI talking to integration, talking to an ERP, and EDI at the moment is like a kind of a dark art, and it will continue to be so. But yeah, systems do talk to each other, but at the moment it's probably a little bit interpretive dance and point-to-point interfaces.
Cool. Oh, go on, Ada.
There's been mention of kind of big bang transformations, and Steve, you kind of mentioned it as well. I'm just curious if some of that big bang transformation happened because of either a lack of iPads at the time, like there was a lot of legacy systems that took one picked them, things would all fall over, or did you look towards phased releases of the end goal? A few people talk about big bangs, so whoever wants to pick it up.
So we've just done Big Bang. So
Go for it.
ours was very much around time constraints, compliance, risk, all of that sort of thing. But we had to look at the whole global ecosystem, because with that, you're obviously running at a pace, but that also carries risks with it, because if you then miss something out to our design comments that we've talked to, you risk something breaking and not trading at the end of the day. But from our point of view, we had 450 different applications that we had to break down and talk to, and we ended up rebuilding 189 of those. The rest we had to leave alone at this point in time. But we had to make sure from a diligence point of view, testing point of view, that still that end-to-end, both front-end and back-end, still stood up and was performant. So we were up against it from a time point of view, which meant that we had to throw resources at it to make sure that we de-risked as much as we possibly could to go live. If I'd had a choice, more time, and the capability to do things iteratively, then absolutely that would be the smoothest way to get live. But you de-risk as much as you possibly can given the circumstances we were faced with. And yeah, out there in the big wide world. And POS and e-com at the same time.
What got?
Be my question.
Last question then.
Yeah. So I've been accused of being optimistic in professionally as it is. We were in New York in June, Mariel. You won an award for that project. So having heard about all the bad things about integration, why was that project so successful? You know, what did you do so differently for it to go?
I had a really good team of people.
Yeah.
And then doing both large projects concurrently, I think at the maximum there were probably around 500 pairs of hands in the pie across all the systems integrators that we had across Clark's teams, business change, wherever you wanted to touch and whatever we were touching. So to make it a success, you had to have the holistic view. So you had to know what touched what, where, when, how, and how it all joined together, which comes back to architects and design, the due diligence applied up front in terms of the products that we were selecting, and joining that all together and making sure that there was not one person that didn't tell the truth, and everybody worked collaboratively with one another. And I know that sounds really, really cheesy, but if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have been able to do and achieve what we achieved. So it was a real team event.
Amazing. Awesome. Cool. Well, look, I think we're bang on time. Del's nodding. Well done, Dave. So let's give him a round of applause. Thanks, guys.